We want to welcome you to the International Mother Language Day at the Institute of Asian and African Studies at Humboldt University at Berlin, Germany. This is Linda Gerlach and Christfried Naumann. We are members at the Department of African Studies and invite you to a round trip through Botswana, where we are going to present its diverse languages with some examples of speech and music. Why Botswana? First, Botswana and Southern Africa are a main area of interest of teaching and research at our department in cooperation with partners in Southern Africa. Both of us have some personal experience in doing research in this country. Second, Botswana is an interesting case since it may be described as relatively monolingual as compared to other African states. But even here, culture is amazingly rich and much more diverse than one expects coming from the outside. So please accompany us to Multilingualism on the Ground, a round trip through Botswana.
Okay, so let's start with some general information. So Botswana is located in Southern Africa, and its total land area is 566,730 square kilometers. And this is roughly twice as big as Germany. Its current population is about 2.5 million people. And it has a population density of 4 per square kilometer. If you compare this to Germany, for example, Germany has 240 per square kilometer. If you look at the urban population, however, it's roughly the same. Both countries have a little bit more than 70% of people living in urban context.
Botswana is a semi-arid, landlocked country where 70% of the surface is covered by the so-called Kalahari Desert, which is actually a sandy, semi-arid savanna. In the northwest, there is the Okavango Delta, a swampy inland delta with rich wildlife. And most larger settlements of Botswana are found in the east and southeast, such as the capital of Botswana, Gaborone. At independence in 1966, Botswana belonged to the 10 poorest countries of the world. Since then, however, it has achieved fast economic development, for instance, concerning the gross domestic product, which has risen from $1,344 in 1950 to more than $18,000 in 2021, which is the third position in Africa, next to the position of the People's Republic of China. The economy is mainly based on mining industry, such as the world's richest diamond mine at Johwa, cattle farming, and tourism. But also from a social point of view, Botswana reaches top rankings in international African-wide comparisons concerning anti-corruption, democracy, or freedom of the press.
Now we are going to have a look at the linguistic situation in the country. Botswana can be translated as the Tswana country, and nearly 80% of the population speak Setswana. But
Fatshe leno la rona ke mpho ya modimo ke boswa jwa borraetsho a le nne ka kagiso ina lentle la tumo la tšhaba ya Botswana.
Ke le amošela mo lehatsheng letšho le lente la Botswana. Ke lehatshe le le gomile ripuo re le rentsi. Ngo ya ripuo je ke sekgalagare.
Khaito kwetwe tira uri libilo ke beilwe ra. Ara kwa corona dimqim kabiritu. Qim kwan ko qoma qona ha China dimnqum ko hua. Awem ngum ko qona. Ngimqiba ko corona tamaqiye.
Natuurlijk een van daardie klere en klanke is Afrikaans. Natuurlijk in Afrikaans is baie interessante taal. kan baie respectvol wees, maar tog baie platvloers, afhangende van wat jy kies.
Njia chito chivandu vetupuki chivavendi ku Botswana chivavendi andukobva South Africa okusha era kandi upura rimbara nawo ndarika kama mahiyarwi
Bakalanga vanowanika ku Central neku North East. Uyenda chose unoti ku bodara yeRamukhwebana nebodara yeMaitengwe. Bakalanga kodwa vathu veli kuti vanoda ndevo yavo kwazo.
Pode opakam, pode konuka una kumainye. Awe, mahana pita anondira pane hana mana kushimba hano ye ame kumpitu na endi. Pode opone nuturi.
This slide gives an overview of the languages that are spoken at home. So the big blue part you see here is Setswana, with nearly 80%. And as you see, the second biggest language, Ikalanga, has only 7.9%. You can also see that this light blue part is actually a summary of a lot of small languages, everything which is below the line on the left-hand side. And even here, again, the gray and the yellow part of the side are again summaries of even smaller languages. So Khoisan, other Khoisan languages in total is 1.9%, and other foreign language 1.2%. There are between 24 and 38 languages spoken in Botswana, depending on the counting. They belong to 5 distinct language families: Bantu, Khoikwadi, Kra, Du, and Germanic. Khoikwadi, Kra, and Du languages are often grouped together as Khoisan. We summarized here the languages for you in this table. Please note that we will keep the color coding you see here for the rest of the presentation. So the Bantu languages in red, Khoikwadi in purple, Kra in blue, Tu in green, and Germanic languages in brown. Now let's have a look at the language policy after independence. English and Setswana became the official languages of Botswana, with a clear distribution of roles, well summarized in the citation of Nkosana. English has been allocated the very important role of being the language of education, and Setswana the role of national language, while the other local languages in the country have no official roles at all. Since English is the language of education, it is also used in primary schools from grade 2 on. But the proficiency of children is often not good enough in English, so there's a lot of code switching in the classrooms. This picture you see below here is an example of a bilingual English Setswana billboard from Gaborone. And you'll find a lot of bilingual Setswana and English billboards and street signs and everything in the country.
Language policy after independence aimed at linguistic assimilation to Setswana as the national language and English as the first official language, respectively. Other languages were stated as being unwanted in parliament, the media, and schools. This is a quote from Nyati Ramahoba, another social linguist from Botswana. Language diversity was being viewed as a problem in which minority languages, cultures, and identities must be eradicated. And Sir Ketumile Masire, the second president of Botswana, asked the citizens of Botswana in 1989, I quote, "not to spoil the prevailing peace and unity in the country by fighting for ethnic language groupings to take precedence over Setswana, and the tribes insisting that their languages become media of instruction within their respective areas would break up the nation." There is a second language-related problem in Botswana, namely that English is viewed and as the is viewed as the language of power in politics, law, and economy. To quote again Khoisan, in Botswana, as in most other sub-Saharan African countries, the ruling elite has used English as the power tool of inclusion into or exclusion from further education, employment, economic or social position, and Setswana as a tool for national unity. Moreover, the rich and the ruling elite realize that a good proficiency in English gives their children an advantage in education, because education is associated with a good competency in the English language. Therefore, those who are good at that language are respected as educated people and exercise a great deal of influence in the society. Thus, the status of spoken languages in Botswana is similar, for example, to that of spoken dialects of German in Germany, often associated with a lack of education and social status.
In the last 20 years, more and more initiatives for linguistic pluralism were arising. One of them, for example, is Reteng, the Multicultural Coalition of Botswana. This organization was founded in 2002 and is promoting the inclusion of indigenous languages and working with the government trying to enact reforms. And this organization even handed a complaint to the UN Human Rights Committee. And I will quote here an opening comment by Lydia Nyati Ramahowo from 2004. I am a member of the Wayei, one of the unrecognized ethnic groups in Botswana. I am here representing a coalition of 13 associations registered to advocate for the linguistic and cultural rights of the non-Tswana speaking groups. Botswana is Africa's shining example of democracy, with a vibrant economy due to the good governance. This is an achievement all Botswana cherish, and we would like to jealously guard this well-deserved image of the country. There are also a lot of small associations and trusts for individual languages and cultures, as for example, the Kamanakau Association for the Wayei Language and Culture or the Naro Language Project.
Since 2020, the Ministry of Basic Education finally engaged to include minority languages in primary education. And this, together with the University of Botswana, the Department of Information and Broadcasting, and some other institutions. The implementation of this initiative is planned for 2022-2023. There was some delay due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is planned to start the project with the biggest languages where material is available, such as Ikalanga, Shikalahari, Naro. Thus, Botswana officials have recognized that education in one's first language is important for democracy and against cultural genocide. We see here below some photos from the seminar of the introduction of local languages in the school curricula, a workshop at the University of Botswana in 2020. Now, let's start with our round trip after these introductory remarks. We will start with the language situation in the capital, Gaborone, and take you to various towns and villages in Botswana that represent settlements of various speech communities. So to Mutsudi, Francistown in the northeast, Kasane in the north, Maung in the northwest, and a small village, Kekenye, in the center, before coming back to Gaborone. And we will start our round trip with Gaborone, which is the capital of Botswana, situated in the southeast next to the border to South Africa. Gaborone is the capital of Botswana and the biggest city of the country, with more than 230 inhabitants and more than 400,000 inhabitants in the larger area. Gaborone was founded in 1964 next to Tlokweng and was named after the chief Gaborone, the famous chief of the Batlokwa tribe in the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. Gaborone was planned and built as the new capital of the independent Botswana, 1966. And the main languages in Gaborone are Setswana and English. City boroughs, for instance, include both Setswana and English names, such as Bontleng village, and both languages are present in the linguistic landscapes. So, for instance, street names are usually in English, but they include Setswana place names, often written again according to the English spelling. Adverts and billboards, as we have seen before, are in English and Setswana. And English is the predominant language in written and official communication, in economy, such as supermarkets, offices, in education and politics, while Setswana is predominant in private spoken communication. Here at the bottom, we see billboards in Setswana and English. This leads to a widespread Setswana English bilingualism, at least or especially for the educated class in Gaborone. And even the English of Botswana includes many or various Setswana borrowings and catchwords, such as Botswana for Tswana people, nationals of Botswana, or Akere, isn't it? There is common Setswana English code switching, and we want to present you a part of a radio interview from Radio Botswana from 2020, where a medical expert was interviewed about the current situation of COVID-19. And you can listen to it and hear English borrowings such as numbers, status update, English phrases within Setswana sentences such as confirmed cases, out of, or even entire English sentences.
Ke re ditlhatlhelele jalo Dr. Tsipagay ke go amogele Dr. Tsipagay ke re ra leboga gore o bo tlile re kgaogane ha kana ka mosupolo ke re ditlhatlhelele jalo Dr. Tsipagay ke go
metseo ba le 25 ke ba ba hodileng ba reng di recovery and ba le 49 bone out of ene 79 o ke ba ileng gore ne le batho ba ileng gore re ba testile ko melelwaneng mme ebile ba hela ba boetse go ga bone se se ra gore re na le balwetse ba le bane mo Botswana ba ileng gore ta active cases ba ileng gore ba sampe ba na le mogare ba tshegeditse mo dikokelong tsa rona ba le bararo ba le ko sa ekitimela.
Okay, this should be enough. As a musical example of multilingualism, we want to show you a piece of music, a song which was recorded in Gaborone by musicians from Botswana and South Africa. And languages you can hear are Setswana, Venda, and English. And we want to ask you to go to this YouTube link and to listen to it before you continue with our presentation. Our next stop is Mutudi. Mutudi is about 40 kilometers north of Gaborone. And it is an example for a traditional settlement in the rural southeast of Botswana. The main spoken language is Setswana, and the area may be considered as more monolingual than the city of Gaborone. Mutudi is actually a large village with 44,000 inhabitants, and in the same time, the administrative center of the Gatleng district, that is the center or the tribal authority of the Bakatla. Here, you should know as a background that Botswana is divided into 10 rural districts that you can see here on the map. And the majority of the rural districts go back to traditional chieftainships of the Setswana-speaking groups. The most important ones being the Bakwena in the Kweneng district, the Bangwaketse in the southern district, or the Bakatla in the Gatleng district with Mutudi as the center. There are smaller groups such as the Batlokwa or Bahurutse, since southeastern Botswana used to be a refuge for Setswana-speaking groups from the east, modern South Africa, being in conflict with the expanding Boers in the 19th century. So there are smaller groups such as the Bahurutse, the Batlokwa, Balete, fleeing to the territory of modern Botswana. Even the language Setswana is actually a kind of cover term or umbrella term for various mutually intelligible language varieties, dialects, such as Sequena, Sekatla, Singwato, which still serve as important reference points for linguistic identity. So Setswana is not a homogeneous unit, but more a kind of social construct. There are dialectal differences that are sometimes difficult to cope with in written language. So for instance, to cry is Golela, but in the dialect of Sekatla, it is Golla. Or to come is Gotla, but in the dialect of Singwato, it is Gota. The question of what correct Setswana is depends mainly on the dialect that a speaker speaks, and people usually see their own dialect as the correct speech form. So we see that even in the more monolingual parts of Botswana, monolingualism is a kind of complex phenomenon. And as an example, we listen here to a part of a reading of a story by Mapeni Moloi from Mutudi.
Tlholwe le mmutle. Ikile ya re mmutle a na le tlholwe. A ba eletsa dinaka tsa ga tlholwe ka dine di le dintle ebile di opela monate. Fa re o di kopa mo go tlholwe, tlholwe a ba gana. Mmutle a bo a loga leano la go di tseela tlholwe. A ba raya tlholwe a re, molekane, a re epe khuti. Tlholwe.
This map shows the different Setswana-speaking groups and dialects, and also different groups and dialects of Shekalahari, for which the situation is very similar. Both languages are closely related Sotho-Tswana languages, and it is assumed that the ancestors of these language groups spread from the southeast to modern Botswana in the 12th or 14th centuries, respectively. Our next stop is Francistown in the northeast. Francistown has more than 100,000 inhabitants and is the second largest city in Botswana. It was founded in 1897 as the center of Southern Africa's first gold rush, occurring in the Tati goldfields after 1864. The main spoken language here is Ikalanga, which is the largest minority language in Botswana and closely related to Shona, which is primarily spoken in Zimbabwe. And these languages go back to the kingdoms of Zimbabwe from 1200 to 1450 and Mapungubwe from circa 1075 to 1220. And these kingdoms were well-known examples of ancient kingdoms in southeastern Africa, being part of the trade network of the Indian Ocean, with impressive examples of architecture, arts, and jewelry, as you can see here in the illustrations. As an example for Ikalanga, we want you to listen to another song by Ndingo Johwa, and we want you to go to this link and before you continue with our presentation. Our next stop is Khoisan in the far north of Botswana. Khoisan has about 10,000 inhabitants and is the administrative center of the Chobe district and is close to the four corners where Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe meet. Also being close to the Victoria Falls, the Mosi-oa-Tunya, and representing the entrance of the Chobe National Park. Concerning languages, Khoisan is multilingual. The local minority language of the area is Chikuhane, previously also known as Subia. But there are other languages in the area, Ikalanga, Setswana, English, and other minority languages. Chikuhane is actually one of several Bantu minority languages in the north and northwest of Botswana, such as Shiei, Thimbukushu, Liriku. And the first historically tangible settlements of these groups occurred in northern Botswana, probably since 1500, probably coming from the Zambezi River, a bit further north, but following previous Bantu-speaking groups already there in northwestern Botswana since more than 1,000 years ago. And we want you to watch to another example, an example for the minority language of Chikuhane, following this link before you continue with our presentation.
So from Khoisan, we're moving on to Maun. Maun was founded only in 1950 as the capital of the Botswana, which is a dialect group of Setswana. Before it was a Yei village. It is located close to the Okavango Delta and thus became the tourism capital of Botswana. It's also the starting point for safaris. We have put down for you the numbers of inhabitants here from 1936 to nowadays, so that you can see how fast the number of inhabitants was growing. So especially since the 1980s or 1990s, it was growing very fast, and this is most likely due to tourism in the area. So nowadays there are over 55,000 inhabitants, and Maun is the fifth largest town in Botswana. The Okavango Delta is linguistically diverse, with the languages mainly coming or belonging to the Bantu and Khoisan language family. So here on the left-hand side in red, you can see the Bantu languages in the area, like Thimbukushu, and on the right-hand side, you see Khoisan languages, Nuga and Khani and Tsikha. And then there's also one Ka language spoken in the area, which is Juthuan. Recently, a stunningly rapid degree of cultural change has been reported for the Okavango Delta. One aspect driving the cultural change is the loss of skills in the mother tongues. And this is presumably the same situation as in many places in Botswana. And I want to read to you a citation from Onalena do Seloswane, who says, furthermore, among many of the minority language groups, the younger generations are losing allegiance to their mother tongues and adopting mainly the dominant ethnic Tswana identity, as well as other dominant regional or local level languages. So as an example for the Okavango Delta, we want to show you the song Na Tambora by Mambo Ntema, and you can find the song under the link you see here. Our next stop is Kikenye. Kikenye is a small settlement of approximately 200 to 300 inhabitants. The inhabitants are mainly relocated individuals and their descendants, who were traditionally leading a hunter-gatherer lifestyle in the region where there's nowadays the Kutze Game Reserve. It is extremely multilingual. The languages spoken there are belonging to 4 language families. And these are Bantu languages, 2 languages, Khoisan and Kra. The number of speakers and the status of the languages differs significantly. The graphic shown here shows the total number of the speakers of the languages that are also spoken in Kikenye. The non-Bantu languages are generally highly stigmatized. Madiache, Tui, and Ta are at least severely endangered. Madiache can be expected to be extinct within the next 2 decades. All mother tongue speakers of Madiache, Tui, and Ta are multilingual. So the Madiache speakers are at least trilingual and speak also Tui and Kalahari. The Tui speakers are at least bilingual and also speak Kalahari. The Ta speakers are also at least bilingual in Kalahari. And the Kalahari speakers are probably bilingual also in Kalahari and Setswana, but do not have any proficiency in the Khoisan languages. Ongoing language shift is present for Madiache, Tui, and Ta to Kalahari. Madiache, Tui, and Ta are not or almost not passed on to the younger generations. And the younger generations grow up mainly speaking Kalahari as their first language. So as an example for Kikenye and the linguistic situation there, we want to show you an example of a speaker who was recorded close to Kikenye. And this speaker is proficient in all 3 languages, just presenting to you, so Tui, Madiache, and Ta.
Kawari ikaw ko kachan ti do ma ti tu a do kum ka ti kwen jua ko ka ti kwen ai ka tsasa ika ti tsasa ti ka itse tsasa kaka to na ta kuma ti tsasa cheka ti ngamo to kum ka ko ngara ka ti si tsasa se ya ko ti twa khana ti ka go tam tui tam ka hey Nkanka who can suck it on in Kanka Sena. Johwa in Kanka. Where I'm Kati, Makhadzi, Yaki, oh, I say.
So on this map here, you can see the full linguistic diversity of Botswana. And again, like before, we were color coding the different language families for you. So in red, you see the Bantu languages, in purple, the Khoisan languages, in blue, the Kra, in green, the Tu languages, and in brown, the Germanic languages. So finally, we're going to return to Gaborone. But now we're going to look at Gaborone more from international perspective. Gaborone is a modern international city with a business district, a state university, private educational programs, modern government buildings, and many more. The main immigrant groups in Botswana, who are also mainly residing in Gaborone, are Zimbabweans, people of Indian origin, and Chinese. The three main religions are Roman Catholic Christians, Hinduism, and Islam. Gaborone is also linguistically international. So there is a British Council, there's the Alliance Française, and since 2009, so relatively recently, it also has a Confucius Institute. There is no Goethe Institutes, however, so if you want to go to a Goethe Institute, you have to go to South Africa. The media are usually in Setswana or English, but since 2009 also, the Chinese-speaking population has its own newspaper, the Oriental Post. Its president, Miles Nunn, is the CEO of a construction company, Mileage, in Gaborone. And here I have a citation of Miles Nunn for the launch of the newspaper. In launching the paper, I wanted to improve relations between the Chinese and Botswanas. The Chinese could learn a lot about the culture and diversity in Africa. We also want to publish a few pages in English so that the Botswanas can find out about us too. Concerning Chinese politics, we shouldn't and we don't publish anything and everything. It's just like that. There is also quite a broad offer of YouTube channels and blogs of people from other countries living in Botswana. So for example, there's quite some people from India who have vlogs and YouTube channels in various Indian languages and also English. And there's also most likely a lot more of other online offers in different languages, but they are very hard to find for us because we don't have any proficiency in these languages. So as an example for the multilingual and international Gaborone, we want to show you a part of the video, or want to show you the video of the singer Phologolo featuring Zakwe, which is also interesting because it actually has an introduction by a Chinese speaker speaking Setswana. So you'll find the video under the link you'll see here. So to summarize, at first glance, Botswana actually seems to be pretty monolingual, with almost 80% speaking Setswana. This is kind of comparable to the linguistic situation in Spain, for example, as you see in the graph on the right-hand side, where there's also about 80% speaking Spanish. But Setswana is not a homogeneous language at all and consists of very many different dialects. It has 24 languages from 5 language families. and approximately 20% of the population speak a different language that might actually even belong to a completely different language family.
There are only 2 official languages in Botswana, Setswana and English. And there are 2 major language-related problems with that. One is the language conflict between the functions of English versus Setswana. The other one is that there is a problem with the insufficient recognition of minority languages, at least in the past. So these problems are derived from efforts to unify and develop the country through English and Setswana only to decrease minority language speakers. There is a more recent development, however, namely that the society and politicians acknowledge that languages, including many minority languages, are part of the cultural identity and need to be supported. This is what we wanted to show you. Thank you for your interest. And we want to thank also our funding organizations and our partners in Botswana. Thank you.